What is audience capture? Audience capture is when an influencer is no longer the one doing the influencing. The influencer follows their audience. The influencer follows the cues from their audience, the positive or negative feedback that he or she gets from the audience, and then acts in that way. Basically says what the audience wants them to say and moves ever so slightly towards what the audience wants. And oftentimes, we discussed this in the last video about presentation of self and how we're all acting and how we play roles. The audience is writing the role for the influencer. Because people, they don't want to hear what an influencer has to say. They just want to hear what they already want to hear coming out of the mouth of a person they like to look at. They don't care what this person has to say. Not all of them. I shouldn't say that, because there are people out there who genuinely want to expand their minds, expand their thinking. They want to be introduced to new ideas, and some of them do ring true and some of them do not ring true depending on their life experience. So not everybody is like this. But you got to think, what does online filter for? Online already filters for people who need an escape from the real world. So here we are. And that's actually unfortunate, because you look at the demographics, you're like, all people are like this, all people are like that. It's like, no, the people who are actively online, they're not exactly the same as the people who are busy with their families. They're busy with their business. They're busy with school. Those people, the more functional you are, the more functional you are, the less time you have to spend online. It's just the way it is. Because it's hard to be on Twitter while you're at the gym. It's hard to be on Twitter while you're parenting your child. So the people who already are online a lot are, I want to say there's something wrong with them, but they're seeking something. They're seeking something that is not given to them in their real life, in the real world. So they're seeking it out online. Okay, the worst people in the world are the ones with their family in their profile pic that are currently fighting with strangers online. It's like, go be a parent. In 20 years, that kid will be in therapy right next to kids whose parents were addicted to alcohol and crack. So if you're fighting with strangers online, please put down the pipe and or phone and go throw a ball with your kid. So you have people who are online and they're seekers, they're trying to fill this void, and they want to hear what they already know, kind of. Maybe a little bit past what they already know, but what rings true to them from someone they like to look at. That's it. They want to hear their own words coming out of this person's mouth. And that's also, we get into what kind of superstars you like, what kind of movies do you like. You know, it's a personality thing. Now, it's kind of in fashion. Let's say it's kind of in fashion to flatter the audience. It's in fashion to flatter people. They say, it's not the fault of the people. It's not the crowd. It's the leaders that get them all riled up. The people themselves, oh, they're blameless. They're so innocent. They're so perfect. Is that true? I don't know if that's true. It doesn't seem true. And this kind of gets into what we were talking about. We've talked about it a lot with the crowd, the audience, the mob. Now, a group of humans does not have to form a mob. It doesn't have to happen. But it's kind of hard for it to not happen, especially when that group is under threat. Actually, when the group is under threat, it makes the most sense for all of those people to come together, to form a mob. So we are forming these mobs, we are forming these tribes, we're going to war with each other. A lot of it's to do with this constant bombardment from the media and from online that we have something to fear. But you know what? You know why they call it social media? Because it's social, because we're on it. So we really have to think how much we participate in this dance of getting hyped up. George Carlin has a great bit about it. He has a great bit about politicians. And people always say, oh, the politicians are to blame. The politicians are so bad. And he just cuts all through the mess and says, look, who elects the politicians? Where do they come from? They come from the people. The people are the problem. I'm going to try to put this clip in and they might get me for copyright, but I'm just going to put it in there because it's brilliant. Yeah, it's the people. So that begs the question, do the leaders rile up the mob or does the mob rile up the leaders? We've been told our whole lives it's the leaders that rile up the mob. It's these people that get out in the middle and they speak and they rile up the mob. But it's not true. And we noticed this over COVID. In fact, I'm going to read a great passage from this book here, The Psychology of Totalitarianism. Mattias Desmet. Do you remember I did that video on mass formation psychosis? He calls it mass formation because psychosis is a loaded term, but really, you're like, mass formation? You mean like gravity? Like, no, it's mass formation psychosis. You kind of have to add the psychosis to understand what he's talking about. Regardless, I did that video on mass formation psychosis. Go check that out. I'm going to read you this clip where he talks about how the mob and its leaders work in unison. They work in unison to fire up this frenzy. The frenzy itself is what needs to be studied. It's a hysteria. This hysteria, it itself is like a wildfire that takes hold of people. Ultimately, maybe because they're bored. We'll get into that in a minute. The fact that totalitarian leaders are themselves caught in a form of hypnosis is illustrated by the psychological response to being removed from the crowd. When Nazi leaders were stationed for a prolonged time in countries that proved unsusceptible to mass formation, such as Denmark or Bulgaria, something predictable happened. They began to feel insecure about the cause they were serving, and the Nazi regime could no longer rely on them. In other words, they woke up. This shows that leaders are not only hypnotized by their ideology, but also by the masses. The leader himself is entranced by the effects he produces in the crowd. Between the psychological condition of the masses and their leaders, there is a kind of circular causality. They hypnotize one another. Fortunately, unfortunately, some influencers jive with people because the people like their look or their cadence. It's similar to cult leaders. Why do some go for this one and not that one? Below the surface, a lot of these cult leaders are actually quite similar, or a lot of these influencers are quite similar. So you got to think, an actor plays the role that their fans want them to, or they don't work. A minister preaches what the congregation wants, or the congregation goes somewhere else. This is capitalism, and they're selling tickets to a show. Well, look, how does an influencer make their money? Okay, there's a few ways that an influencer can make their money. There's brand deals. A lot of influencers, you'll see advertising for things in their videos. And why shouldn't they? This is a job. You know, it takes a lot of hours to do this, and why shouldn't they make some money on that? I don't do that because I don't want to get caught up in any of this. Then they make their money off of advertising. They place ads. So YouTube or whatever will place ads within the video, and there's not that much money to be made there. Honestly, people think that there's, all this money, you're a grifter if you're online. Like, it's 8 cents per 1,000 views. It's not worth it. Okay. So, but it's, for some people, if you have a lot of followers and a lot of views, well, it kind of makes sense. And you can get a lot of views if people like you and if people hate you. It doesn't matter. Some people play that card. Hey, good for them. Good for them. Why shouldn't they? And then, of course, you can get views and money from Patreon. Patreon, the people who like you give you cash directly. Here you go. Keep talking. Here's some cash. Great. Okay. So now we're obviously in capitalism. This is a capitalist society. You got to pay your rent. Rent keeps going up. Mortgage keeps going up. These influencers need to keep making their money. So they have to keep saying what their audience wants to hear because the audience has to stay tuned in. Now, this isn't just influencers, by the way. This is not just influencers. The New York Times does this on a subscription model. If they put out an article that people don't like, immediately the audience threatens to cancel their subscription. Do you remember they put out an article in defense of J.K. Rowling and all these people threatened to cancel their subscription? I'm going to cancel my subscription. Goodbye, New York Times, blah, 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 blah. One article out of thousands to challenge that worldview. All these people threaten. Now, of course, like I just said, the people who are actively online threatening, is that really a good chunk of their subscribers? You don't really know, because a lot of their subscribers are not going to be online threatening these things because they're busy with their lives. So we have the audience capture. The audience capture, which because of this heavily online demographic we just discussed, kind of falls very closely with the extremism in the algorithm because the algorithm prefers more extreme views. I'm going to put this great stat on the screen. And basically, most of the people who are online, they're not posting anything. They're just there. They're lurkers. They're lurkers. Creepy people in the corner of the room. Just peeping, like, what's going on? What are you doing? Da-da-da. And they want to be entertained. They want to be entertained. They're here for the show. And this means that the more extreme the views are, the more eyes go on it. It's just like if you're at a freak show, at a circus, you want to see the freakiest freaks. Someone with social anxiety, that doesn't cut it at a freak show. No, I need a person with two heads. This is the online. It's the circus. So the algorithm already factors for more extreme views by more extreme people. And these people, there are people who just want attention. Let's be honest. Some people just want attention. They might not have much to add to the conversation, but they want attention. And the saddest part is when they do have something to add. We talked about this with Nico Avocado, where as an artist, he seeks attention. Not all artists seek attention. Some people do it for the purity of the art. But his personality type is such that he seeks attention. And so when the audience was giving him attention for eating more for mukbang, that's what he went along with. So he was audience captured in a very, very negative way. Check out that video, America and Obesity Story. We go into Nico Avocado in that one. So you have these personality types that seek attention. You have an audience that wants a show. And what do we get? It just gets more and more and more extreme. And of course, this is what's coming on the feed. So you have people who think that what they're seeing on their feed is normal, is the way the world actually is. And if they go outside, they'll see maybe the world is not this way. So this principle is called algorithmic radicalization, and the documentary, The Social Dilemma, really explores it. Definitely go check that out. And so it overlaps very closely with audience capture. And is it the same? I mean, we do decide what the algorithm says. We do click on the more extreme things. So I'm not going to necessarily make it. We learned this recently with Scott Adams. Do you remember the guy who created Dilbert, who has now completely ruined his career because he got caught up in this feedback loop of alt-right, right-wing racial extremism? Technically, Scott Adams was mad because of a poll in which the majority of Black Americans agree with the phrase, "It's okay to be white." Now, "It's okay to be white" is a loaded term and also the title of a 2001 white power song. Despite all that, a lot of people didn't know, 53% of Black people agreed and 26% had no opinion. But to me, no opinion is a logical answer to that question. So this makes Scott Adams by far the dumbest celebrity self-immolation to date. Perhaps audience capture as well, because you have the people who are encouraging him to say certain things. It's just like a rat in an experiment. They do good or they do what you want them to do. Give them a little piece of cheese. And so that's what the audience capture is. It's that little piece of cheese. And what's really funny is that most people who watch videos don't comment or like, but influencers don't understand that because humans are ape 2.0 and we're not programmed that way. A very small portion of an audience can capture an influencer like a small portion of society can capture the national discussion. I don't know exactly how we avoid this. I mean, you have to teach people that there are more important things than being popular. We never have to be part of the mob. We have free will and we have choices. However, our choices become very limited when you start talking about the money, because do you really have a choice to be homeless? These reporters, these influencers, do they really have a choice to be homeless now? Now, why do I bring this up? Why would I even bring this up? The contrarian undercurrent has gotten out of hand. Now, we're not going to talk about COVID-19 because it was a mess. It got really messy. People were at each other's throats. I'm going to put up a certain survey that said enough people wanted to send the unvaccinated to quarantine camps that it's an issue. This Rasmussen poll from January 2002 is actually pretty shocking. Now, keep in mind, neither Republicans nor Democrats has a majority of the population. So actually, the biggest political group is the independents. So when you look at that, these stats show how many people of either party actually wanted to take extreme measures against the unvaccinated. Do you remember what happened? Remember what happened in 2021 where they actually tried to tear families apart? And Yes, I blame the leaders. I blame the leaders of the mob, but I blame the people who went along with it just as much. Have you noticed that some of these people, they went from COVID policy doesn't make any sense to taking the whole of the red party line? The whole of it. Okay, I get you don't agree with COVID policy, fine. But now you've changed your views on climate change, on abortion, on Ukraine. It's just a party line. They just have to go to that party line. And this is something my friend told me, and he is absolutely correct. I'm not going to blast his name out in case I get canceled for this video. I don't want him getting canceled too. But this is something my friend told me. If you're going to go all on one party line, there's money to be made. If you're going to say, I agree on this issue, I disagree on this issue, and take it apart issue by issue, piece by piece, there's no money for you. There is no thank you in that. There's nobody out there to say, hey, good job. Thanks for walking me through this. That's not what people want to hear. Or there's not enough people who want to hear that to pay your bills. And that's just it. So that's how the audience captures people. People who are actually very smart, people who are actually very brave. But we forget that kind of creeping, kind of whispering over our shoulder is this need to be part of a group. And so these people who, went out on a limb for one subject or another subject, now they have to go to the whole group because those people will exile you. That audience will exile you if you are against even one topic. Do you remember when Tomi Lahren came out and said she was pro-choice? Do you remember that? So going against the party line on abortion got Tomi Lahren fired. The wrongful termination suit she brought against Glenn Beck and the Blaze was settled out of court. Tomi Lahren is a right-wing pundit. She's a young woman. She has obviously a very high intelligence, and she's very brave, very courageous. We did see her at Politicon one time, and she said, I'm going to say outrageous things that gets the mob riled up because that's how I get attention, which is so irresponsible. That is so irresponsible. Imagine your minister was like this. He wanted to be famous more than he wanted to lead his flock. Whatever. She did say that at Politicon. I heard her and I watched her, and me and my then boyfriend, my now husband, were there like, you really saying this? You said the quiet part out loud. Anyway, she said that she was pro-choice one time. The free speech team fired her immediately. If you want to keep going, if you want to keep making that money, you agree with everything. You just tell the people what they want to hear. That's the business model. That's how you sell the merch. The merch. Oh, with COVID-19, I believe that legitimately broke people. People saying that there should be forced vaccination. Someone actually said this to me, and I was like, "Oh, you're out of my life. I'm just going to cut you out like a tumor." Anyway, we had people who got caught up in the hysteria and legitimately went insane, and they were backed by all of our institutions. Also, and I'm just going to say this, we are going to at some point have to address the psychological trauma that 2021 caused, because it scared a lot of people, it broke a lot of people, and a lot of people will never trust what the media or the government has to say. Even if they completely revamp, if they fire everybody, if the government and the media fire everybody and hire totally new people, there is a much larger swath of the population that will never trust them than there was before COVID. So we're going to have to address the psychological trauma that COVID caused. It would be great to get apologies. Hopefully in this next election cycle, when people, they realize, we can't just tell everybody to f*** off. They can't just spit on a tenth of the population, call them trash, deplorables or whatever. Hopefully there will be some kind of reckoning where people at least say they're sorry. I just think a whole lot of people are going to be carrying this for a long time. And I think it has made them permanently contrarian because they're there for financial reasons, but they're also there for emotional reasons. They're there for social reasons because this is their tribe now. So what are we going to do? Are we going to live like this? We're going to live in chaos? We're not going to live in chaos forever. Chaos begets order, which begets chaos, which begets order, which begets chaos. And it's the cycle. It's the cycle. Go check out that fourth turning video. You might think, oh, this is magical thinking, but really, it kind of makes sense. And sometimes magic overlaps with science, and it's just a beautiful dance. Subscribe.